This is Mark. In this video, I wanted to talk about mental illness and how society is trying to, or attempts to constrain, neutralize, or normalize society as a whole. So basically, these boundaries, there's always a boundary limit, or for any given disorder, there's like a limit where, like for instance, we consider bipolar. Um, this is goes on two poles. There's two poles and a normalized range that we define. Anyone defines it can oscillate or change. So this can shift inward or outward. And then we have the positive side and the negative side. So if we find that someone resides out here and oscillates in both directions, then we can clarify that it's based on the deviance from the norm. So if this is a neutral axis to position, a relative. So if that becomes large enough, it basically defines it defines the limits. So this is the limit max, and this is the limit not necessarily absolute minimum, but these are the boundaries. And with multiple disorders, it's like a spectrum. Narcissism. Explain this in another video, but there's a spectrum. So this is like let's just say this is a true image, and essentially this is when it's really a function of R value relative to let's say true value. We don't really know the true value. What I mean by this is like some event occurs and the reaction is so strong relative to what how would I put this? So there's like a reaction, positive direction reaction. We could say this is normalized. And then this is excessive. So excessive, or there could be a depreciated reaction. So basically, this is like a limit to scale, and if you exist out here, we define this limit based on our definition. And of course, this limit can go in one direction or the other. And then there's other disorders that are harder, that are more readily defined, like if like seizures, for instance. It's evident. Autistic spectrum, it's also like exists along a spectrum, but seizure activity. So like for instance, seizure. So it's a spectrum again. There exists some limit of over-excitability. So it's when the neurons spike, and when you reside in this range, you start having seizure-like activity. So this is based, and if you reside over here, you don't have the activity. Everyone, exists on that spectrum, but there is a maybe a normalized. It's kind of not the scale, but there's a neutral axis. So typically, if you think of like neuroactivity. So if this is normalized, and then of course seizure, there's a threshold. There exists a threshold. So this is a threshold. Spelled that wrong, but yeah, threshold. get rid of that. So basically, once you go beyond this, the intensity picks up, seizure activity. And then, this is a let's just say a typical based on all the whole population. So if we put this all together, this is what we define as normality. And then there exists some bound. And we define this bound based on probability of progression. Is optimized on a relative scale. Not absolutely, but how we define it. And of course, this could move as we gain or lose, not, as theory collapses or gets refined in such a way, this will change. And basically, so long you exist here, you may not be an outcast. So essentially, like in statistical analysis, on a generalized scale, there exists a lot of times a normal distribution. So again, this is like normality, or in this case, the probability of this is probability density function. So the probability of events, in this case, it's going to be equal to 0.5 in a normal distribution. This is normal distribution. Yet, or it's maximized, and then it skews as you go in this direction or you go in this direction. It gets really limited. So basically, what like this is like a range that we define. It's not necessarily symmetric, of course. Statistics is again, this is based mainly on probability, but this is just showing that, over here in this region, this is low probability. This is low probability. So anytime you go in this direction or this direction, probability depreciates to 0. And again, this is always changing and it's skewed usually, and it's not symmetric, but this is just showing for illustration that, population density, it's more favorable over here. And as you go over here, I think we're all outcast. Everyone's an outcast on a relative scale. But a society as a global scale may consider this region, of course, in being an outcast or not typical. So we have to constrain this bound, and I think nature does this naturally. Its survivability is based on probability, and of course, there needs to be some constraints, because if we didn't allow these inhibitions, society would become chaotic mash and mess, and therefore there needs to be these bounds. But at the same time, these bounds there's some deception. A lot of these disorders are, of course, overdiagnosed. A lot of these disorders are loosely defined, and of course we refine it over time. But it's always good to take it sometimes with the opinions, with a don't just believe it firmly. It's always good to be skeptical, because in life there is a lot of it's a playing game, it's a playing field, and this probabilistic relation is very skewed in a lot of ways, and biased due to error, due to a lot of other things. But this is my input. I wanted to kind of bring it up because I think it's an issue with all these disorders being diagnosed. Actually, it's easy to, I know there, the stigma, but there's also a tendency to associate these disorders with correlations and favorable correlations, and therefore it kind of can fuel or feed the ego, and actually we can use these disorders for leverage of our own worth, and that can be a problem. I think actual disorders need to be severe enough such that the probability of survival or just managing life in general gets reduced, and at least the functionality is greatly minimized. Now, if the functionality is high, there's many possible reasons for, and I think the disorder should are no, I don't think anyone would want to have a true disorder when it really inhibits functionality. So yeah, that's just the basis. Is that's why like being diagnosed implies there is a problem. There is a you trying to find a solution that's outside the control. If you have good control, I mean, it shouldn't be treated as such a lot of times. So yeah, that's just my take on this. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.